Let's take a deep dive into one of the more polarizing Penguins on this roster, Daniel Sprong, coming up next. Yo-ho everybody, and welcome to another edition of YinzerOnHockey. Before we begin, make sure you go down below, click that like button, click the subscribe button, and make sure you click that little bell so you stay up to date on all your NHL news. So, wanted to take a bit of a deep dive into Daniel Sprong and kind of try to get an understanding of what I think his leash might be with the organization this year. He was signed as a restricted free agent this offseason. I believe he's signed to a one-year contract currently. He is no longer waiver eligible. And he tends to be a polarizing figure amongst Penguins fans. Okay, so he signed to a 2-year contract at $750,000 average annual value, according to Cap Friendly. So that's what we're looking at right now. He's got 2 years, no longer waiver eligible, and he is yet to, at the NHL level, really show his worth. So he was a very highly touted prospect coming out of the, I believe it was the Finnish League is where he came from. And he was drafted in the second round in 2015, which is basically the Penguins' first round, because that's usually where our first draft pick comes in, because we've usually traded away our first round picks. So, since being drafted in 2015-16, played 18 games with the Penguins, had 2 goals, no assists, and was a -1. So he never really broke through. We sent him back down to the Quebec Juniors, played 33 games, and in 33 games he had 16 goals, 30 assists for 46 points, but was still a -7 for the Charlottetown Islanders. Last year, or in 2016-17, he spent the entire season with the Charlottetown Islanders, played 31 games, 32 goals, 27 assists, was a +29, 59 total points. So he played fantastically that year, and everybody around the Penguins organization and around their fan base was, really clamoring for what he can be at the NHL level. His scoring ability is there. You can see it in the numbers that he has all the talent in the world offensively. His defensive game has always been one of the bigger question marks. So, last year for the Penguins, he played in 8 games, had 2 goals and an assist, 3 points, was a +2, before being sent back down to Wilkes-Barre. In Wilkes-Barre, he had 65 games played, 32 goals, 33 assists, 65 points, was a +4, and that was on a pretty talented Wilkes-Barre roster. So far in the NHL this year, he's got 2 games played, no goals, 2 assists, and is a -2. And the other the trend that's been noticeable over the past few games is towards the end of the game, especially when we were trailing against Montreal the other night, Mike Sullivan isn't even giving him shifts late in the game. He's been averaging around 6 or 7 minutes of ice time per game. So it makes you wonder what their intent is with him moving forward. He's a talented scorer. You would like to have him up in the top 6, but if you put him on the wing with say, a Malkin, like that would be far and away the worst Corsi line imaginable, with Kessel, Malkin, and Sprong on the same line. So you would like him with more possession-driven guys like Crosby and Gensel, but then you wonder if he's got the IQ to play on a line like that. You can't really play him on the third line because he's a defensive liability. You don't really want him on the ice at the same time as a defenseman like, say, Letang, who has he likes to pinch a lot, and you can't trust your right winger to get back defensively when they're not known as a very defensive savvy player. So my question to you guys is, what is our expectations of Sprong? How much leash is the Penguins organization going to give him with this new contract and the fact that he is no longer waiver eligible? We sent Zach Aston Reese back down to Wilkes-Barre Scranton to start the season because he didn't have to clear waivers. I'm certain that was the biggest reasoning in the roster decision, is because guys like Simone and Daniel Sprong both have to go through the waiver system. And as we've seen recently, with guys like John Sebastian Day, when the Penguins put a guy on waivers, it's likely that he's going to be eaten up by another team, especially a guy with Daniel Sprong's potential. He has that potential to be a 20 or 25 goal scorer in the NHL. And if you have the right style of defenseman playing behind him that you can kind of mask his defensive shortcomings, maybe you can get that type of production out of him if he can play with a bit more reckless abandon, with only focus on scoring and getting the puck to the net. He's not a guy that gets into the dirty areas. He's not a guy that gets down below the goal line and wins puck battles in the corner. And that's a guy that you need on a line with, say, Malkin and Kessel. You need somebody that goes in there and digs the pucks out of the corner. Malkin does pretty well in that in his own right, but he's a center iceman, so you want him playing more positionally sound from the center ice position, where the wingers have a little bit more freedom to move around in space and create their own offensive opportunities. To me, I'm starting to look at this. It's twofold right now for the Penguins, because their defense has been suspect, to say the least, to start the season. So we're carrying 8 defensemen on our 23-man roster. The injury to Matt Murray makes us even think more consciously about our defensive alignments and how we want to play them. So I don't see it likely that Sprong is going to be a healthy scratch anytime soon, because we don't have that ability right now to healthy scratch him, because Derek Grant is our 13th forward, and he's a natural center iceman with the ability to play left wing, not so much on the right wing. So that's where the other shortcoming is right now, is because Sprong is a right winger, and we are relatively thin at the right wing position. So the likelihood is right now, until the Murray injury gets figured out, until he comes back from his concussion symptoms, until our defensive alignments get figured out, and we can either decide on sending Juuso Riikola back down to Wilkes-Barre, or keeping him on the roster, and maybe parting ways with Chad Ruhwedel, to where we can bring up the extra forward to have that ability to healthy scratch Daniel Sprong. You're going to see Daniel Sprong in the lineup for the foreseeable future. But my question is once the team gets aligned in a way that they're comfortable with moving forward, how much leash do they give him? And where does he fit in the roster going forward? Do they possibly chance putting him on waivers and sending him back down to Wilkes-Barre for another year of development in Wilkes-Barre, with the threat that he may not clear waivers, and you essentially get nothing in return, like we did with John Sebastian Day? And I feel like if a guy like John Sebastian Day not knocking him at all. I think he offered a lot to the Penguins organization, especially down in Wilkes-Barre. He was a very talented player down there. But if a guy like John Sebastian Day gets ate up on waivers that quickly, I would have to assume that Daniel Sprong, especially for a young rebuilding franchise, a guy like Daniel Sprong would get swallowed up pretty quickly on waivers. So what type of timeline are we looking at? End of October, end of November. Could we see something at the trade deadline where maybe they try to hang him out there as a possible return in a bigger trade? Something like that. Let me know in the comments below what you guys are thinking of Daniel Sprong. How do you feel his development is? Is it something that the coaching staff maybe isn't doing right with his development, or is it something that he is just not grasping at the NHL level? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe on the video. Follow me on all the social media listed in the description below. I would appreciate that. And until I see you next time, have a good day.